I believe that creativity is also a skillful means, taking a Buddhist path here, a skillful means to a higher way of living. It can be, all else being equal. It doesn't mean it has to be, but we can help it to be that, and we can help the process of finding our higher potential, both individually and together.
Welcome to Caritas Consciousness Project. I'm Gloria Quillu, and Caritas is dedicated to promoting the evolution of consciousness as the key to individual growth and global healing. We do this through online presentations and interviews with guest speakers, as well as classes and study groups. We draw from a wide assortment of both ancient wisdom and leading-edge studies in science, consciousness, spirituality, and philosophy. We're in our 20th year now, which is exciting. We started in 2003. And in 2020, we began recording our presentations on Zoom. Our video recordings are viewable through our website, caritascenter.org, and on our YouTube channel, which is Caritas Consciousness Project. And we have a little over 100 videos now recorded on well, they're not all on YouTube yet, but close to 100. And we have 102, I think, already recorded. As a nonprofit organization, we rely on the support of our members and donors to keep our program going. If you enjoy our presentations and would like to support this program, you can make a donation on our website or become a member. And there are benefits to membership. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have lots of wonderful videos there. So let me now introduce our guest speaker. Ruth Richards, MD and PhD, is an educational psychologist and psychiatrist, professor emerita with Saybrook University in Humanistic Psychology, Creative Studies and Consciousness, Spirituality, and Integrative Health, and is also associated distinguished professor with the California Institute of Integral Studies. She teaches, researches, writes, and speaks on issues of everyday creativity. Dr. Richards has studied creativity in educational, social, action, and spiritual contexts, as well as issues in aesthetics and awareness, creativity and consciousness, and chaos and complexity theories. She has numerous publications, and her authored Everyday Creativity and the Healthy Mind Dynamic New Paths for Self and Society for Palgrave Macmillan won a Silver Nautilus Award. And that is this book here.
Yay, thank you.
Which the Silver Nautilus Award is Better Books for a Better World, of her new co-edited book for Oxford U Press, Chaos and Nonlinear Psychology, Keys to Creativity in Mind and Life. David Pincus, past president of the Society for Chaos Theory in Psychology and the Life Sciences, said, compared to other books on chaos and complexity in the last 30 years, this book sits at a unique and highly accessible crossroads. So that's the newest book, right? Dr.
Yes.
Richards asks us to dare to open to our creativity and to the mysteries of life, to find the health and joy hiding there, perhaps behind a screen of mindless and conventional assumptions. Let us entertain a new worldview and view of self in world. This may even be our job as humans and our evolutionary path. And her website is www.drruthrichards.com. So welcome, Ruth.
Thank
Good to see
you.
you.
And thank you, good people, for coming. This lovely
on
holiday
4th of July
weekend.
weekend.
I am now putting up the doing my best here. Share the screen. Okay, can you all see that?
Yes.
Can anyone see that?
Yes, it's perfectly visible.
And again, if you have a question at some point, you can raise your hand, but I'm going to have questions for you too. And I thank you. Edna's already shared something that's very helpful. I don't know if anyone else wants to share something right now about your interest in the topic, but I've taught about this for a long time. I'm a professor emerita at Saybrook and have taught elsewhere as well. And it would be nice to know a little bit about you if you want to say something, since we have a smaller group. Sue and Elaine, I don't know if you do.
Edna.
And Edna again.
Edna again. You have to unmute. You have to unmute if you want to say
something. We could just go on, because there are going to be plenty of stops and there are going to be some activities. So we'll just go ahead. If you have a question, you can do that, or you can go to the little place that used to be here that said reactions, and you can make the little cartoon hand go up, whatever you like. Okay, this is called A Creative New Normal. I've been publishing on that title because it seems to me, in a world in real danger and where we are using so little of our higher capabilities, that we might want to look at what the norm is now and why we want everyone to be the same, some do, and what some of our possibilities are in the view of, what broader things we know these days about human potential, consciousness, chaos theory, and so on. But we're going to start with creativity. And creativity, as some of us know, and I started because of my mother's mother and doing art, and I just felt it brought me incredible peace and joy and other things. Part of that was also her, but it's not only about art. It's not only about science. It can be about everything we do and a way of life, which we will go into. But this is why we're looking at a new normal, is it also can be true for everyone. It isn't just for famous people or eminent people. It's a way of life. I think I'm probably not telling this group anything new, but I said it anyway. Now, this supposedly will advance to the next slide. And since it isn't,
while you're advancing it, there is something in the chat from Sue that I didn't see in time to interject. And she says, I'm not an artistic creative type, but am interested in recreating my life in my fourth quarter.
Okay, wonderful.
In response to your question.
It's a perfect response. Yes, thank you so much. And Elaine, I'm glad you're here. If you pronounce it Elaine. I knew someone else. Elaine, right?
Elaine.
Okay.
Yes, it's fine.
So we'll see where this goes, and you will have a chance to say other things. Now, it may be because of the chat this didn't advance. This is strange, it did not. But here we are. So, okay, there we go. So we're going to ponder these questions, and Gloria's been pondering them too. She has a lot to say. Are we creative? All of us. All right. What is it? I'm going to come back to that in just a second. How does it feel at best? We know how it feels at worst. I can't get it. Yeah. Is anything holding us back? And then this is like part one. And then part two is looking more at views of dynamic, interconnected, holistic, evolving ways of life these days, and getting a feel for that, which you probably have, getting more of a feel for that, and how that intersects with our being creative. And then there's something at the very end that I'm saving for the very end. Okay. So are we creative? I did want to ask anyone who wants to say, what is it to you? Because it's a made up word. We've said there's this thing called creativity, but it's different to everyone. It's different for people who think it's just for, unfortunately, too many for famous people. I can never be creative, someone says, because I can't draw a portrait. Now, Edna maybe can, but but for them, that's what it is. And if they can't draw a portrait, they can't do it. And that's so sad because of the galaxies of other alternatives that are there. So if anyone wants to say anything now, please do. You need not. We'll go on.
Well, I would say that I interpret, or I define that word, creativity, as just when we are looking for answers to anything. I could be cooking dinner and suddenly I have an idea for a new way of cooking rice.
Hey.
I have an idea. How about some black beans with the rice or something like that? That's creativity, right? It could be anything that we do in any area of our lives that, that is original, or even borrowed and applied in a new way, right? So that's, so I think everybody has creative impulses and creative aspirations, probably, and creative ways of doing many different things.
Now, I don't know if you can all see the chat. I just pulled up what Sue put, and I think this is so perfect for, remember I said I want to read a section. It's so perfect for the section I want to read, if you don't mind. Not living life in a rut, doing the same thing. Don't we do that over and over without rethinking what might be a more joyful or satisfying way of being? Thank you for that.
That's great.
This Paul Gray McMillan book, they actually sell individual chapters too. Oh, we also have Elaine. Let's he has his hand up. Let's hear from him.
Yes, Alain.
I should have lowered my hand because I was going to say something like, the moment I escape my habits, my established ways of doing things, I am at least on the edge of creation. Whether it materializes. I just created a course, for instance, for 20 people in the last 9 weeks. And for me, it was a creation, not just my creation. We were a team doing that. But we have not reproduced anything we had done before. That's for me, the essence of creativity.
Wonderful. Thank you. Can I ask what course it is?
Yes, it's for elders. It's called Embodying Regenerative Worldviews.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So how can we renew our way of looking at the world so that we renew our behaviors as well?
Okay. Thank you. In this book, chapter 2, 1 is introduction, 2 is called Missing Worlds, and that has been the one that has had the most downloads. Plus, this vignette, which preceded the book, actually had 200,000 people downloaded online. It's something you may know. Awaken.org, wonderful site. Awaken.org. But I'm going to read this, and I wish they'd all bought a book, but whatever. But anyway, thank you, Elaine, for your course, and Sue for your comment too. This chapter starts with a moment that really struck me deeply, that had to do with getting out of a mindless rut and worrying about the future and the past and stuff. So I'm going to just read this to you. It's not all that long either, but this event stopped me cold. Okay. I'm rather good at maps. I'm good at using a GPS device, but I forgot the maps. And here we were, late afternoon, last day of vacation. This is a number of years ago. My daughter, my cousin, and I driving along a 2-lane highway in mid-state Oregon. No other car in sight, and the sun had gone down. Where was that charming little village? It was supposed to be right along this river. We drove on farther and farther into the unknown. River always at our left as our guide. We kept passing farms and fields and scattered houses, and now a few lights were coming out. And in my head, I was doing a litany of self-criticism. Why didn't we start earlier? Leave more time, have lunch sooner, save dessert for the little town, bring the map, and on and on and on, a list of all we did wrong, reliving as if that could help us now. My cousin and I were both impatient and stressed. My daughter, at least, was happy. In the back seat, text messaging a friend. I pull up on the shoulder of the road to think. Just then, like, wow, a new scene had appeared, a new slide projected on a screen. Where did it come from? Look, I insisted. Even my daughter looked up, right there, out of nowhere. A magical, misty landscape, fields moving off to infinity, in muted purples and pastels, fuzzy in the haze, with clusters of tall, lush trees, darkening and receding in the dusk. I turned the car engine off. All was silent in the hot summer air. Beside us, a plum-colored river barely moved between a border of trees, its dark, lazy water reflecting the last light of day. How breathtaking. This landscape had cast a spell. We sat in the silence of an indrawn breath. Where had it been? If I had seen even a trace of this beauty while driving along, not a neuron had registered it. No mental bell had rung so the conscious mind could stop and take a look. I had missed it all. We all had missed it. We miss a lot, almost everything. In fact, in our world, our task-focused filters take care of that, selecting only what we need. We need to get to work, have some lunch, find that report, water the garden, go out on a date. We see what we need to see, often for purposes of survival or survival of the species. Gregory Bateson, speaking of beauty, said aesthetic judgment is selection of a fact. We create the sight. Even as we become conscious of it, we do not simply see it in our daily lives. Who or what is doing the selecting and why? Is this predetermined? Can we, in the here and now, make a change? Can we see further? Can we see better? Can we even better our world? Opening our vision is a first step in everyday creativity. Thank you.
A great story. I enjoyed reading it.
I'm gonna move on here, and so we can discuss that later if you like, because it's of course relevant. If this isn't going to work, though, I don't know what is happening, because it was working before.
Yes, it was.
Here we go. Okay, just to say, the background for this talk is 4 different books, and Gloria was kind enough to mention the last 2, and the others are nice ones also. But we find that many healthy qualities come out along with living creatively, as you may know, being more open, more dynamic in the world, consciously aware, and so on. I'm pointing those out now. We'll come back to this. And the first book I did a content analysis of I edited it, and different wonderful people contributed, like Rian Eisler and David Loy, and pulled out the themes that came forth. Everyday creativity is something that I have studied along with colleagues at Harvard Medical School, McLean Hospital, Dennis Kinney, and others. And we even developed something called the Lifetime Creativity Scales, which there's a reference up there at the top, which Daniel Goleman wrote about in the New York Times. We were pretty psyched by that. But our only two criteria are on the right there. But as I said, there are many definitions. This was taken from the definition of clinician and wonderful researcher from years ago, Frank Barron. And so, like, here's a little kid, and you're right, there are all these things that it's not so much what, it's how we do it. It is not so much what we do as how we do it. And it could be making dinner. It could be making a giant xylophone. Isn't that great? In the backyard, which this little kid has. Now, we're going to go through a lot of slides here, but we'll look at him. This is so cute. It could be landscaping the yard. It could be reorganizing a business. It could be teaching a class. So, as you know, so many things. Okay, but originality or relative originality, or, you know, something, some newness, some freshness is key. And the other part just means it's not random or accidental. And that's what we're talking about here. There are plenty of other definitions. But what's great here, if you know who Keith Sawyer is, and he's a very good researcher, is he's finding the latest trends are for three kinds of studies that didn't used to be so popular. And one of them has to do with turning from the study of world famous, I'm quoting him here, scientists and artists, to the study of creative abilities, and let me add other things, creative qualities that are possessed by everyone and used every day. The tragedy is the people who don't think they have that. I'm not creative, I can't draw a portrait or whatever. We all have guesses and hunches and intuitions. We try this, we try that. We can do that. We are also looking here at all of these so-called 4 Ps. So it's not just the outcome. That's great if we do something we like. That's an Alex Gray painting there on the right, and I love what he did. But it's also how to happen. Let's turn the camera around and look at us. Who did it? How did we do it? What was the setting? Because if you have a mean boss who says, you're just doing horrible work, is that going to help? Probably not. Okay. Here, I'm going to ask you to do a little thing here with me. But in your own life, to picture very vividly, if you can, maybe for a minute or so, a time when you were doing something that you were very happy about, that had to do with something that was new or unusual, or, you know, that was fresh for you, and you were in that present moment, you know, doing this thing. And just get something in mind. It doesn't matter what. There are really no right or wrong answers here. But something that you felt very good about. And it could be writing a novel or doing a painting. It doesn't have to be. It can be one of the traditionally creative things too. It's all every day. And now, if you could just for yourself make a note of and write down, if you want, 3 ways that makes you kind of feel, or 3 reactions you have. And I was doing this with some people and thinking of one thing, and I said, I feel kind of liked from that, but it's however you feel, just can be one word, but do a few of them just for yourself and take a second. And then if someone wants to share one, you can, you don't have to. So anyone want to just mention one?
Well,
Joyful.
go ahead, Alain.
The first word I wrote was joyful.
Okay.
That's exactly the first word I wrote.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Second one was inspired. Inspired.
Inspired.
Yeah.
So rather than, I'm not trying to have everyone say something here. I'm going to go to the next slide, which is, I did this as a study with a colleague of mine assisting a year ago at a creativity conference. And it had both people who came, and there were 29 people who came, and then a bunch online. The online people couldn't do it because we just wanted the people who came, and did it right at the beginning before this talk. They knew the title, but before this talk took part. And here were the kinds of things that came out. And I just found it great. And joy, you can see there from the top left, was one of the things that came out. It felt really joyful, and there was flow, and they were immersive, and they had insight and excited, and very much in the present moment. And then there were these kind of clusters of how they worked. And one cluster was sort of, physiologic, adrenaline cluster. And one was more meditative. And one was more kind of altered states, lost in experience, dreamlike, And that's just what it happened to be for them. All right. But this made me think of Abraham Maslow's being value of alive. This is really it. As far, and this has been published, if you're interested, I can tell you, in the Journal of Creativity Open Source. So it's already out. And I could tell the people this year they could look up what they said, right? Because last year, what did we say? And so this is, I think, one of the kind of indicators of when it's good, and why this can be so healthy for us, even increasing our immune function, or giving us new hope, or helping us feel resilient when it seems like we have nothing left to give. All right. Sometimes it's like feeling like you're in the zone. And Csikszentmihalyi, the late Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, use that term. But there are core qualities, going back into Frank Barron and others, that seem to keep coming up over and over. Things that have to do with not just having one creative moment, but going on to live in a way that is alive and innovative and fresh. And so that includes things like being open and non-defensive and risk-taking. And have you heard of tolerance of ambiguity? People, what's that? It's like, wanting, okay, we're okay not knowing, and let's see what else we get, rather than coming to some closure. Okay, what may be holding us back? And for a lot, there are so many people who say I can't be creative, even now. And where there can be real concern about not being like the average person, that we're going to be thought to be weird if we're doing this, or that's pathological, or there's one right answer, etc. So there's this list of things, or we don't want to change the status quo. And so there are all these ways that we can lock ourselves out. Again, I may not be telling this group too much, but we're talking about a new normal here. And a new normal is not about a norm. The new normal is not about being the same. It's about our diversity. It's about the richness that we can bring, and the many ways that we can discover who we are in our lives, and do that together in our world. So the new normal is not about the norm. We're not going to go over this table. We're going to look at frame, although we'll come back to it in different ways. But the next part is about really these 5 things on the right. And they're also discussed in some detail in that last book, which is Chaos and Nonlinear Psychology, Dynamic New Keys to Mind and Life. So frame 1 is more reductionist. Here's the separate person, maybe not trying too many new things, worried about getting a little too unusual or unstable. I'm doing the kind of extreme here, but living to survive, and probably only one person can really be best in a situation, and wanting to have control over things. So that's one picture. The other one is dynamic, holistic, evolving, and we're going to go to a whirlwind tour of this because we've all seen it, just to get more of a feel. of frame 2, which is more this connected, relational, and always surprising way of life. So may I just ask folks if you know much about chaos theory? And this is not supposed to, yeah, okay. Do you want me to say Alan or Elaine?
Alan. Alan or Alain French?
Okay. Alan, thank you. Thank you. So I like to call it the science of change and surprise, because those are really the qualities we see around us, and some of the words we use a lot, that I would say until the computers of the 1980s, we weren't really able to do that much with, although the Chinese, thousands of years ago, made their first hexagram in the I Ching, the creative. And this is exactly what they were talking about, not a new idea. All right, well, I'm going to do this whirlwind tour, and their examples, they're not all happy, but some of them are. And a COVID surge is very, very interesting example. I'm just giving some pictures here first of change and surprise. And this is more kind of going through these. The butterfly effect, you've probably heard of that, right? Or somebody's heard of that. That here we have, as mathematician Melanie Mitchell put it, even, these tiny uncertainties in measurement of position and momentum can result in huge, and she said, errors in long-term prediction. Just change, okay? That the weather is hard to predict for this reason, for example. Now, it may be that the butterfly, who's not responsible, in another country, flapped its wings, and the global weather system shifted, and it self-organized in a new way, and that made it unstable, and the lightning came. So there are a lot of ways it could happen, but these tend to include unpredictable moments. Other moments, okay, emergent. I just described that in an emergent way, where things self-organize, but it's always a surprise for us, because if the whole, as the saying goes, is greater than the sum of its parts, that means we didn't know what the whole was going to be like yet. We were seeing the sum of the parts, right? Or we were seeing the parts, and maybe we didn't have a clue. What interests me is these birds that are flocking. They know, they didn't read a book. They didn't, solve anything. They know how to flock. This is part of who we are. We have a blue one here, blue person.
I got it. Oh,
okay. Well,
it's Edna. She has trouble with her computer.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to.
So she goes in and out.
Almost here. Right. Okay. I have someone else I'm pretty sure is having trouble with their computer. So let me just go on, because this is, again, going back to our questions, more to get a feel for this. Just like my little vignette driving along the Oregon beautiful backwoods. The problem was, in that case, was really more worried about something and looking to the future, worrying about the past, but it was not really being present to what was there. And with chaos and complexity, we can say the same thing. We're in this dynamic, evolving world, but maybe we haven't really learned to see it as well as we could. And I've certainly found that myself, as I'll show you. So you can see if that makes any sense for you. But here we're going to start with sudden and go on with emergent. So those two we touched on a little. Balancing, alive, which I was using to characterize what you were all saying about the positive creative time. And then interdependence goes to a profound place, I believe. But anyway, let's look at sudden. So suddenness isn't as welcome to some people as others, but it really is part of life. And I mentioned the butterfly effect, and the classic example is this this butterfly here, which is an endangered species, is flapping its wings in Paris, and it causes, via many things, a storm to erupt over New York City. And this is called sensitivity, the phenomenon, to initial conditions, where this small thing can lead to a large result. And Shakespeare, by the way, wrote about the opposite. He wrote about, if you don't take opportunity when it comes, you may be stuck in the shallows. You may for years languish and be stuck in the shallows when you wish you had taken the opportunity. So here's a storm, and I am curious if anyone either knows this storm, or actually hurricane, or thinks they might identify where it is. And Gloria, if you have any other comments you want to make as we go along here about, say,
Well, I was
sun.
thinking in terms of the butterfly effect, how, every thought we have has a ripple effect, affects everything and everyone. It's something that can be applied across the board, with everything that we do, everything that we think, everything that we feel has an effect, just like that butterfly.
Thank you for that. And so is that true of everything, that anything that happens, it doesn't have to be dramatic, but we never know that this little thing, it's a pebble at the bottom of the ocean, said Thich Nhat Hanh. And it affects outer space, right?
Yeah.
Wow, thank you for that. This is actually the beginnings on the United States eastern coastline of Superstorm Sandy. And there it is with Florida. If you look at sort of the bottom left, it's near Florida. And it went up the coastline, and people I know, including one wonderful group with an art gallery, found the water came up to here on one of their pillars. I mean, there was horrible flooding at the subways and all of that. And so, unfortunately, and climate change is a big part of what we're talking about here. So I will go on, but this is to look at a happy one. So here is a sudden birthday party for somebody's 30th birthday, and hooray. And there are many things that are sudden. Here is an avalanche. As you say, in a way, Gloria, every thought is sudden. Every thought is it may be some memory that we've had before, but it probably still has something new. And we are creating every second in some way. It's not some giant thing. But here's this avalanche. It's coming down the mountain, and we hope no one was injured by this, but we tend to think of this as a negative thing. In fact, nature doesn't want snow piling up indefinitely on mountains. And so some of this is part of what happens, but it isn't necessarily our favorite. However, here's another avalanche. And it's kind of what you were talking about, Gloria. An avalanche of mind. And where that last little bit of information, or whatever it is, insight or aha or something from our collective unconscious arrives, and everything shifts, and the earth is not flat or whatever, and we will never see things in the same way again. And so I'm bringing creative insight in here because I think there also is there is some evidence that relates it to things like the fractal structure of our brain and so on. But I think the main point is these are some of the sudden things that are happening us all the time. And you think, what are we going to have for dinner? Whatever it is, there are all these little flickers like fireworks or something as different parts of our brain are going. But like many things, there are many small ones and not so many big ones, but we do it. We do it all the time. Where does it come from? Well, many places, right? But one thing in this book, in the book with the jumping person here, it's called Deep Sea Diving. Our unconscious mind, which has been chopped up different ways, and I think this is a Freudian picture. You have a Jungian picture, collective unconscious, but call it what you will, that we have this very narrow kind of range of awareness of our world that we're conscious of, that's on stage at any moment. And if we look in the mirror, we think we know who we are. We're seeing this face and so on. But meanwhile, there's this huge reservoir, including Jung's shadow, the stuff we really don't want to know about, that exists. And it turns out people who are very interested in being creative, because we've all got that potential, tend to be more aware, have better access to what's going on below consciousness, below the usual kind of surface of conscious awareness. Okay, so here's one example, and from one of the co-creators of Post-its. And so he would just intentionally say, and I'll ask you if you want in a minute, if anyone wants to give an example of in your experience, but he would just turn something over to his unconscious mind. And that may mean going for a walk, taking a shower, or whatever you do. That it will scan a broader array of patterns and find some new close fits. So I don't know whether that rings any bells for you. I don't normally do that. Okay, but I might. I mean, I might take a walk and see what. Sometimes things do come up on a walk, right? Any comments you want to make, Gloria, or anyone else?
Well, I find when I have a big problem, or doesn't even have to be a big problem, but I find that if I meditate, that I can get in touch with the deeper part, and the answers tend to be there. Yeah. Or at least I can tap into the part of me that is not lacking anything if it's a problem. And then it takes the stress away. And
Ooh,
then
nice.
the answers just kind of come because my field is clearer, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Alain has his hand up.
Okay, Alain?
Yes, I have a question. When something seems to come out of nowhere, it could come out of my own subconscious, but it also could come out of the larger field of which I'm a part. And if I put myself, as Gloria just said, in a meditative mode, where I'm more open to what may come through me, not from me. So do you make a distinction that things coming?
I'm not making a distinction here. I mean, we might make a distinction. I might have some interest in whether something was more of one kind of source or another. But have you heard of theory U, which is used in business?
Yes, I've practiced theory U with my colleagues. Yes.
Oh, well, then I should maybe have you talk about it. But I've written about it because I was so moved that here is a business model coming out of MIT too, right? And Sharma and others, where people meditate together. And I believe meditating together brings another element, but we can discuss that. And that's part of this whole U process, as the coming together and opening up of new possibilities, and then it moves into other things. But also, what more do you want to say about it if you've actually done it?
I think it's more than a business model. It's a model of that applies to the individual and the collective. And the idea is at the bottom of the U, you open, you let go of the things that you may have been reacting to or that you have bathed in for a long time, you let go to let come. So you actually put yourself in a space where things can come, and I don't know whether it comes from within or from without. I tend to go without, in a sense. I am connected to something larger, much larger than me, including my own subconscious, where actually this can be the premise of a creation. And then I prototype it, and
Okay.
that's my understanding.
And I would agree with you. It happens to be used in business, but it certainly can be used anywhere. Yeah. That there are times I say, where did that come from? And I kind of thank wherever it came from.
Yes. Yes.
Main thing is to be grateful for wherever it comes.
That's right.
Trivial example, but every day I play these word games on my phone. I'm very addicted to it. And I'm watching myself be what you said about letting go. I mean, lots of times I get stuck, and part of me wants to keep trying. And the other part says, no, let go. And I have to make myself turn off the game and come back to it later. And it's just amazes me, like later things that I could not have seen when I was trying too hard just come easily. And really it's sort of trivial, but it's like my practice in letting go, which I do believe you, and I just less trivially, I used to do a lot of sort of math related things, and I would get stuck, and I'd have just the same thing, I'd have to like, okay, I can't do this now. And just as you said, I mean, I go for a walk to work or something and things would just come out. So, I mean, it's really good to practice letting go. Thank you. That's all.
Yes. I am really glad you gave that example. I do some of those too. And I think that that we will see later with some looking at brain signatures of different kinds of creative things that we do. What one reason that may work, but I do find that works. So thank you. Okay, I'm going to take the chat away. It seems to keep this from changing here.
Ruth, Alain just put in the chat. Unfortunately,
thank you so much.
Yes.
I'll watch the recording with great pleasure. Thank you so much, Ruth.
Oh, I'm so glad you could come.
Yeah, thank you.
He had a commitment, so.
Sure.
Had to leave
Okay,
early.
well, here we're going to talk about health and healing a little bit. Because doing this, and we'll talk about the neuro part later, but if you look at the kids, and there's a kid behind the, a kid I knew when she was much younger, behind the curtain on the left, and doing the puppet show, and the puppets are kind of not happy with each other and knocking some blocks off and so on. Some people say, oh, why are you letting these kids get all angry? Not that Megan on the left is angry, but is there anything healthy in this? And there can be, it all depends how it's done, of course, but it can be incredibly healthy because we can go, and again, if you have any examples you want to give from your own life, but we can go into something that maybe we didn't quite understand, and we can put it out there with puppets in this case, and maybe even get mad in a way we would never do, and suddenly find that we're getting, and we've let go. We are in a place where we are drawing from that unconscious space too. We let go and suddenly are getting some new insights or developing some new resilient ways to cope with the difficulty. And this has been shown also to increase immune function. It really can give us more white cells, which are going around looking for things that we don't want to have, making us sick. And so T cells in particular, and this is very well shown. So a lot of people say, oh, being creative, that's not healthy. It is healthy. And it can be healthy for the earth. Wouldn't it be better to have a puppet show than these absolutely horrible wars that we thought we would never see again? Good grief. Anyway, if anyone has any comment, please let me know. I'd be happy to hear any personal thoughts you have from your own life if you want. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I've always thought that it should be the leaders of the country who declare the wars that fight it out with each other.
Oh, no kidding.
Sending innocent,
My
people to
goodness.
go fight.
Ah, okay. So going back to the question of a new normal, each of these has just this little summary, and here we're saying, how are we going to live? Are we going to be open? Are we going to be receptive to things that come from places we may not fully understand and have new insights? Can we live that way more? Will there be a diversity of creativity amongst all of us? If we do that, there sure will. Are we open to that and to that richness? And a very important point that I'll say more than once is that a new normal is not about a norm. It's not about all being the same. It's about really cherishing the diversity that we bring within ourselves and between each other. So that is an aha for this one. And these curves are just about, kind of different people. And the unconscious here is pretty important. So more to say there. All right. Emergent is the second one of these 5. And as I said, it's something that's emergent is a surprise by definition, because when it all comes together, now we see it. We didn't see it before. It was below where we could see. Examples are language, or how cities form, or the internet, or climate change, or these fish. So here are these fish, and they're going in a circle, and they're not just following the fish in the middle, but they all know what they're doing. And that really moves me, that they didn't read any book, they didn't solve any equation or listen to any talk, but they know how to go in a circle. If you've ever been to the Monterey Bay Aquarium in California, there's a wonderful huge tank where they're all doing this. It's so gorgeous. I can't remember if they all go the same way all the time or not, but they know what they're doing. All right. In this case, I was here are 2 different kinds of organizations. And so Alone, unfortunately, had to leave. I'm sorry, but it could be a business model or something else. But I did a simulation of this in a business model. And the group and we were videotaped. And the group on the left, we didn't do that one, is where the blue person is telling us all what to do. Do this, 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 this. Okay. The one on the right was where we had no idea yet, but we were coming together to decide how to do a project to get food to the inner city. And so we were going to figure this out like the fish, or figure it out like the birds, right? And, people have lots of different ideas, and we made some changes and did some things that didn't work. And that's part of the creative process. It's not a bad thing to have one idea and move to another. So we were doing that, and we ended up with a plan. And they had us all hooked up to each other by bungee cords. So it was really a show, I'm telling you. Bungee cords, so that they could make a video recording of who spoke with whom and where hubs developed and things like that. And so we didn't go blind. They had us wearing goggles so that the bungee cords wouldn't suddenly snap and hit someone in their eyes. So we were all suited up for this too. But what is amazing to me is this was a chaos conference, but it could have been anything, and we knew what to do. We already know this. Sometimes it's about seeing what we already know, or like driving along the Oregon roads, seeing what's there. Okay, or the internet. the internet is pretty much self-organized. You didn't decide we're going to have this hub and that hub and now link them up sometimes, but a lot has evolved, right? It's a learning system. All right, so just to summarize a few things, and actually I'll say a little more for this group here. Are you familiar with this book called The Weirdest People in the World by the Harvard scholar Joseph Henrich? And it's relatively new, and it's how the West became psychologically peculiar and particularly prosperous. And the weird stands for us, for Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and yeah, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with these, and democratic. But what he showed in this book is that a lot of the world isn't that way, nor is that their primary value system. And in addition, they don't really want to be that much like us. But we're going around, everyone wants to be like us. So some of us have started a project that now has some international interest called the Global Creativity Project, to look at how things happen in different countries. But under diversity here, I put, are we ready for scary AI? I actually am quite worried about AI, not the AI, but because of ethical issues for human beings. And we talked about being open and non-judgmental and lots of good things, but there are a lot of ways that if we don't think more about the ethics of what we're doing, then it's going to get built into these AIs. If it's just about winning or, something, or accepting cultures unlike us. And so the new normal that I'm posing is, can we enjoy and celebrate the many different ways that people have chosen to live around the world? And that's a question. Okay, the third one. So Gloria, anything you would want to say about that one and emergence or anything else?
Well, I was just writing down the title and the author of that book because it sounds very interesting.
It is.
Does he also address the AI problem? No. Okay.
Not that I recall.
Okay.
But I see that as another cultural problem. And it's taken off since last fall, taken off.
Yeah, I know, with the chatbot and everything else.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good example of how creativity can be misused as well as used. It could have wonderful benefits, but in the wrong hands, it can be destructive and really terribly destructive, so that some of the CEOs of these companies that are putting it out are expressing fear, and yet they're still putting it out, so yeah.
And they've quit. So like Jeffrey Hinton, who was called the godfather of AI, and he was with Google, he left. And I really admire that. But yes, I was watching 60 Minutes on it, and here was the current head of Google. And I really thought he was much more interested in the profits than the dangers, although he was discussing both. And that's the kind of thing that worries me. Do we have the ability to slow this down and really, and to look into the future? And look into other, anyway. So all of this, I think, though, challenges us if we're going to live dynamically in this evolving world. Right. Balancing. Okay, this gets really into health and pathology a lot. Okay, so say nonlinear, what's nonlinear? That's a line that is a straight line. And when we say nonlinear, we usually mean a line that curves. But someone could just say it means a square instead of a line. But I'm talking about a straight line here. And a lot of psychology used to be taught just when things could be linear, when you could say y equals a times x. And you can do that for little kind of portions of a lot of phenomena. I'll show you in a minute. But it's like linear usually doesn't work. Our life is much more non-linear, curvilinear, balancing a lot of things, as we were saying. So you look at aspirin on the lower left, and if you take some aspirin, you have a headache and it may make you feel good. Okay, what happens if you take a whole lot of aspirin? I hope you're aware of this. It can kill you. And so I put opiates second, but we know 100,000 people last year died of opiate overdoses, a lot of not meaning to at all for pain relief, but I'll just take a little more, Life is often, I'm glad to see you back, Edna, and you have a hand up.
I could wait till later, but both the nonlinear and the diversity thing lead me to ask you, you're associated with the integral theory people where you're working now, is that right?
I'm affiliated with Saybrook University, and I'm also an associated distinguished professor. So I help with research advising for the California Institute of Integral Studies. Is that what you meant?
That's right. Well,
yeah.
I started this book called Integral Ecology, which is 800 pages long, and I'm just really blown away with what, but so, I mean, it's being able to look at things in these multiple perspectives.
Yes.
What we need to learn how to do. And this ties into the synchronicity that we've been talking about. But I'm very interested in that. And I think that's really key to AI, we've got to look at it in all these different ways and learn different ways of working with that. But so, I mean, I just was wanting to know if that's what you were involved with. So
it's certainly one place I'm involved with. And since you mentioned synchronicity, I know you had a speaker recently, it looked very interesting on synchronicity. But you think about that's part of the balance too. These are forces underneath, right? There are things under the surface that we can suddenly find in a different way, and maybe an acausal way, are creating connections that we never thought could happen. And isn't that something? It's so amazing. So all of this is about nonlinear too. It's about other things, right? And at the end here, it's like relaxation. We're still looking for this sweet spot. Like, we don't want to go to sleep, and we just want to rest and be comfortable. And we don't want to be so agitated we can't stay put. So where do we find this sweet spot? And I'm glad you brought up synchronicity here. But here's the cat in the hat. I like the cat in the hat. And the cat in the hat is finding that sweet spot and is having fun doing it. And balancing of maybe a few too many things, although I like the fish a lot, and the fish tends to be one of the wiser creatures in these books, right? But here we have, like, if you had, and I think I mentioned this earlier, that we could end up being very anxious about something. And let's say anxiety is along the horizontal axis here, and now being effective is along the vertical one. And you can get so anxious you're frozen, and any of us can get that. And it's like, oh my God. Or we can be so relaxed that we forget, let's say, to study for the test or whatever it is. And so, but now we don't care, but we're not going to do so well. It turns out, whether it's surgical success or all kinds of things we might have as a challenge, that finding that peak there, finding that optimal place it's a delicate balance, and it's an art. It's an art and a science, right? And does anyone remember bongo boards? My brother and I had a bongo board, right? Where you would kind of it's a roller thing, and you had a board on the roller thing. And you go back and forth. You go too far, boom. You go too far the other way, boom. But if you do it just right, okay, now if we can apply this to creative insight, and we can apply it. There's a certain amount of uncertainty there. If we are kind of open to inspiration, so that can be from lots of ways, right? We're open to inspiration, but we also need to have some executive functions, frontal lobe, whatever, that we have some way of using this so it will be adaptive for whatever we want, for why we're doing it. We may just want to do that, but that's a reason too, right? That there is this sort of oversight, but it's very loose. And that our creative insights are very healthy, I think, for that reason, that it is really bringing together many ways of being and processing and so on. And so, all right, so someone says, wait a minute, here are these kids, and they just were so out of control at that meeting they went to, and they were making cartoons, but it looked like this is a picture that I think is dealing a little bit too much in that stereotype, that we can have these good ideas, and that's fine. We don't all have to have the same idea. But on the other hand, there are times to kind of have fun and get a little wild, right? And you just keep a little bit of oversight on that so it doesn't go too far, or maybe the parents do that. But it's a balance.
It looks like chaos. That picture looks like chaos.
So let's talk about the edge of chaos. Thank you for that. The edge of chaos. First of all, chaos is not about randomness or anarchy or total disorder. Chaos is really about a deep and beautiful order right before something sudden can happen, a bifurcation. But it's not as if there isn't a beauty there or some order. We just may not see it. Same thing with emergence, sort of at a different time scale. And so the edge of chaos has been used as a metaphor. In fact, ice has been used as a metaphor, or ice floating around, and it's getting colder and colder, and soon it will all fix in one kind of pattern. These ice kind of pieces floating around on the surface. But while they're floating around, it's more like the edge of chaos, that there are all these possibilities that are out there. And at some point, we will pick one of them, or we will do something. But right now, we are allowing things to be very fluid and evolving, and we are tolerant of ambiguity. I'll go back to that one, and letting things happen and not saying that we have to know or control it or anything like that. And this is a good thing.
And there are times in our lives where things feel chaotic because maybe we don't have a clear direction as to what we want to do next. And there's a wonderful quote that I love by Sue Monk Kidd. She wrote The Secret Life of Bees. She wrote that novel, The Secret Life of Bees. And she said, when you can't go forward and you can't go backward and you can't stay where you are without killing off what is deep and vital inside yourself, you are on the edge of creation.
Oh, wonderful.
Not a great quote?
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
And, I think that part of the lesson for some of us, and anyone who wants to chime in, please do, is to learn that there are times like that and it's normal. That it's like, okay,
Yes.
I don't know what's going on. This is crazy. And anyone's done a dissertation has hit that at least once. So I've always told students, you're going to hit that. That's absolutely normal. Don't think that is fine.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
My go-to when I'm in that state is put one foot in front of the other and wait for signs. Just wait, right?
And or read a new book or take a walk or whatever it is,
Yes.
But it's not a bad thing to have that happen.
That's the important thing to remember. I think of it as incubation time.
It can
Right?
be. Yes,
Yeah.
and it can be unconscious where you're off making dinner or doing something else you needed to do, and suddenly, or not,
Mhm.
but
Right.
but the edge of chaos, we can choose. Do we want to be right there? Some people choose to have their life much more active and uncertain, and other people a little less so. And there are different jobs that are more of that or less of that, and different ways people live their lives. And so I think that's a choice to be aware of. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, but this, I do want to talk, because we did some of the original work on everyday creativity and mental health. And that's what Daniel Goleman was writing about. And what we found was so positive and helpful that, and we were looking in this particular study at bipolar disorder, highs and lows within families, and we looked at schizophrenia in other work. But by bipolar here, we're talking about people, you've heard mania is a very, very high state, which can be so excitable and other things that it is not functional. So that's one extreme, and a severe depression. And, you know, people say 1 out of 3 women have been depressed, probably a lot more. But I think many of us know depression in some form, and there that can just be so dreadful. It feels like nothing good's going to happen. It does make sense, and I've been a clinician for many years too. It makes sense not to live through these things if they can be treated, but to find the treatment that works for you. And not every treatment is the same. But what we were able to find for everyday creativity, which is this richness of and openness and joy of how we live our lives, is that there was an advantage for people who came from some of these families, as if there's something running in the family, but it may come out in different ways. And it had to do with the brain state. So there are people who could get very dysfunctional and not happy, but with a little treatment, it could open up a lot of things, but it could open up their everyday creativity. And that's the point of this. Is like the balancing again. It's that there is something there that can be special, but if it's too much, it may be a problem. I don't want to oversimplify this. We've written a lot on this, and the various books I've mentioned all have references to it. And here's a reference to one of our original studies here. And let's see, the book called, well, there's quite a bit of it. And there's a chapter in this book called Normal and Abnormal. It's not a chapter, it's a section. And it says, not what you think, because normal, and a lot of times the abnormal is what we're really looking for, the usefully exceptional. It's not, we're not all supposed to be the same here, okay? But there also is some specific writing, in this case about bipolar, not so much about schizophrenia spectrum, but there are references to all of that. There are lots of references in the back of this book, and there are superscript footnotes, so it's written in an accessible way. But if you're looking for references, you will find them. And I want to mention this compensatory advantage, because some people think, including Kay Jamison, if you've read any of her books on bipolar disorder, that this is one of the reasons that certain things that we might consider problems, at least in our culture, and very painful at times, have persisted, because there is some way in the kind of right dose or the right sweet spot or the right something that it can be adaptive. And this is an area that used to even be taboo when we started. It was like, you're doing what? And so now it's much more accepted, but I think we still have a lot to learn. And I want to just mention that because it very much fits the cat in the hat here and this curve. And it's about finding, not about getting as high as possible. The problem is there are people who think if you get as high as possible, you'll be more creative. On the contrary, and it can be very dangerous. And I want to say that very clearly. Okay. But back to this and then to that. So Frank Barron, I mentioned from the beginning, who's a clinician as well as a wonderful researcher and one of the original trailblazers in creativity, put this quote in. It was one of his more clinical books, but it's worth reading and I love it. The creative person, we're talking about all these ways we can be. We're not one thing. The creative person is both more primitive, and more cultivated, more destructive, and more constructive, occasionally crazier, and yet adamantly saner than the average person.
Wonderful.
Thank you. I say wonderful to Frank Barron.
Mhm.
And you may or may not know that there are some teachers who really don't like creative students. They don't see them as creative students. They see them as too troublemaking or busy or saying too much in class, right? Jumping at, or you also have creative kids who will withdraw because they feel they can't be heard enough for what they want to say, or that what they say may be considered weird by another kid. So this involves re-educating a culture.
Yeah, I have a question, Ruth, if I may.
Sure.
Speaking of children and education, I have never liked the idea of education being competitive. And I think that stifles creativity. And I wanted to see what your thoughts were on that, because competition it's instilled in children in the public school system anyway. It's instilled right from kindergarten. You know, who can do this the best? Who can get the best grade? And it's only one child that can be the best, and then everyone else is not, right? And yeah, so that's my question.
I thank you for that question. And you know, I've been involved in education for years, among other things. And you can talk about, instead of this norm referenced evaluation, so one person does better, and you can have it be criterion reference. This is part of educational theory. Everyone can get an A, why not? But let's get away from getting the A, right? Are we going to also work together in groups? And one of the best examples I saw of that actually was at the United Nations International School in New York City, which was next to where I was staying for a while at what's it called? Waterside. Right. And I got to go visit there thanks to someone I knew who was teaching. And I could not agree with you more. And in this interconnected world, do we need more connection, or do we, want to be against each other? And I want to, well, okay, let's move to Edna here, because I also want to be able to get to the end of this, which gets into this interconnection.
Well, the education touched a thing in me too, because when my daughter was going to school, well, okay, I'll tell you the story and then she was studying genetics or something in some science class, and I asked her a question and she gave me the right answer. And I asked her, how did she get to that answer? And she had a completely different way than I had with my formula mind or whatever. And so, I mean, just want to emphasize again about the diversity. And unfortunately, probably teachers are not the best ways. This sort of integral idea that there's multiple ways that people can understand things. I mean, I'm sort of tying into what Gloria is saying. I just wish there was a way that people could be, children, all of us, could be valued for the diverse ways that we are. And as you said several times, we need that, because we need to look at things from different perspectives. But I don't know how in the world we're ever going to get the system to reflect that.
Well, I'm going to carry on here, because the system is finding things like that. So being alive, let me go through this quickly. Our dynamic presence. Okay. How do we think of ourselves? Do we think of ourselves as separate, or do we think of ourselves as part of a whole? Okay. We're really talking a big goal here. We're talking paradigm shift. I want to know what the word alive means to people. These are cells, right? Presumably they're alive because they may make more cells, and we see the future here. But alive is still a mystery, as you know. I don't know if anyone wants to speculate on alive, but we'll get to more of what you were saying, Edna. Okay. Do we see ourselves like this? Do we see ourselves like a YouTube feature, or are we more like a still photograph on the left here, which is lovely? It's an older picture of a wedding. But do we think of ourselves or contemplate ourselves as, kind of in a fixed place and unchanging? And we have changed since the last slide. We have changed since the last instant, the last breath. We are constantly evolving. We are a process, right? We're dynamic and visionary, and we hope we're open and aware, spontaneous, changing, and we're moving toward the future. Okay, I want to do this one, if you would be willing to. There is more than one right answer, but there are ones that come out more suddenly. And I'll tell you what the first one is, and you see if you can think of, or come up with, not think, come up with a fourth word that fits in any way. It can be the opposite with the three before it. So the example has the three words cookies, 16, and heart. And one solution, because it's not like there's only one solution every question, is cookies are sweet, sweet 16, or sweetheart. Okay. So now if I asked you to come up with a fourth word, and there definitely is more than one, but that would go with the three things at the bottom. If anyone wants to say one, say it. And if not, I'll just tell you one possibility, and that there are different ways to do it. And I think that Edna was talking about this earlier, actually, because if I'm doing one of these things, I tend to use a logical thing first and try to see if that leads to anything. And then if I'm not getting right away some intuitive insight, and then, but if I get an intuitive insight, good. Right. But any thoughts on that one? If you're not sure yet, try the word light and see if that works. So you can have, and sometimes, by the way, the next day is when it comes, right? You get up the next, oh yeah, right. That you can have light cream or light bulb, or heavy and lighter opposites. Okay, does that, say, oh, that's so hard. How would you ever get that? It's amazing how sometimes you can. But what these researchers did, and I like to give credit to people who are doing it long before the people who are known for it now, which is part of this. Everyone can be creative. We're not looking for one group here. So Colin Martindale was doing stuff like this in 1999, and who knows who else. But then there's this group of people who've done these studies that are quite beautiful. So they have had people doing something like that. But they have them hooked up to an MRI. So while they're doing it, they're hooked up. And then they take the people who happened to get all of their responses suddenly. And there are different ways to do it. And there's not a better way. But they're looking for what is happening in the brain when it's aha. Okay. In the big picture in the brain. Little picture may be a little different. And by the way, these are fractals here. These we'll get to fractals on this light bulb that looks like a brain. So here on the left is what's happening during this kind of looking for inspiration thing in these studies. And this includes a slowing down, and a big time slowing down. Theta waves, those are more meditative waves. And low frontal activity, that's more the executive functions. And the right hemisphere may have more visual kind of cues and more things at once. And the experience is more this defocused attention. It's like, okay, you're, open to what's happening, like, tolerance of ambiguity and associative thought and many representations. And so I find this fascinating. There's a lot more that's fascinating about this, like something called the alpha flash, when they suddenly have an insight, and by this latter group, Kunios and Beeman and others, they're students. But there's stuff going on in the brain. That doesn't mean there isn't stuff going on out of the brain. And I'm sure you're all aware that there is mind out of the brain, right? Right.
Yes. Consciousness.
But yes, there's big mind and there's really cool stuff. But in the brain, there are specific signs of this. And I would just pose that if I got worried, I can't answer this, and someone's trying to be the best on some test, I can't answer it. And it's making little beta waves, and the brain is all doing an anxiety thing, and it is not an altered state of consciousness that is as friendly to having these insights. Maybe not at all. So I wanted to pose that one here under being alive, actually. I could have put it elsewhere, but I think our being alive means that we are open in a lot of different ways, in knowing in a lot of different ways. You're going to get to interdependence right in a moment. So the diversity here about being alive it really is life finds a way. Did you see Jurassic Park, where all the dinosaurs were supposed to have been long gone in this particular island, but they had kind of come back, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so life does find a way in the best ways, in ways we haven't thought of yet, and it continues, and let's hope it can, right? And our new normal, I hope we'll honor life in its many forms and in many people, and we can all be successful at once, as well as work together, which we will turn to now. But aliveness takes us into the future. Okay, so interdependence is so important, and I'm going to just kind of quickly go over several areas. Information. The natural world is a misnomer because everything's the natural world. We're part of the natural. So this is more like out in the woods, the natural world, right? Or what the Japanese call forest bathing. And then we have fractals, which is patterning that we all know, whether we know it or not. But it's self-similar at larger scales, smaller scales, it looks the same. Plus then the stretch at the end. Okay. So here we have this internet again, and here we have something going viral. And when something goes viral, it's quickly spreading around the world, whatever that is, some horrible scandal or hopefully something good like a cure for cancer. It would go fast. And thank heavens for that, right? But this is a wonderful example of the interconnection of information. And we could talk about AI here, but we won't. Okay, so here's forest bathing, for example. That's what it's called in Japan. And why? I mean, here we are part of this entire, cosmos. And when we're out in this particular kind of setting, which some people do as a healing journey, taking certain walks that have been prepared in Korea, in Japan, and elsewhere, they're actually measured before they start for their blood pressure and their pulse and other things, because it is so relaxing and they feel so much better. And did you know that people with hospital rooms that look out at something like this are discharged sooner?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody told anyone that. It happens. There is a message here, right?
Yeah.
All right. But forest bathing is a book too. It's a wonderful book. This happens to be a spiritual retreat place, and a not perfect picture I took there. But when I see this hillside here, I try to remember, first of all, this encodes infinity. If we're talking about fractals, which we'll get to, here are these self-similar things like a tree trunk and a branch, and then we have a twig, and then we have a twiglet, and then we have these little tiny ones. And guess what? They're still growing as we look at this picture. It doesn't look like that now because this has been in motion for all this time, and things are changing, even the things we don't think. And like the stupa here, it's changing too. And it's infinity. There is infinite possibility that is happening, and it's dynamic. And it symbolizes to me the future and this aliveness and this endless possibility that we have in these. We won't go into what is a strange attractor, but there are different solutions to what we see in the world and the life force. So call it prana, call it what you want, but there is something here that is energetically, or lots of things, or lots of realms, but energetically being part of this picture that we are also part of. And it unites us with this picture. And I think when we look at the fractals from chaos theory, it does so even more. Now, this is an equation. This is like not a very complicated equation. You take this new z and you square the old z. That means z times z. And then you add this constant. Someone thought it was the speed of light, but it's not. It's just some constant. It depends. And you get amazement. This is just one little piece of the Mandelbrot set, which has been called one of the most complicated and gorgeous figures in existence that we know. And this particular one, which I like, has been called Seahorse Valley. Mm-hmm. And it also has these little kind of Buddhas, the little dark figures here along the side. But the point here is, because there are many other ways you can look at the Mandelbrot set at this, but the dark parts are parts where it doesn't converge, and the light parts is where it comes to a solution. So that Z finally comes to a stop, as it were. And then you make a little dot on the picture and you get this. And it does look like some underwater life, doesn't it? And so a lot of this, even though there's a trick here, it's not a trick. The Z is what's called a complex number. So it has a part like 3, and then it has another part. I see a question on the chat. It's a comment. That is the square root of -1. Oh, yes. Thank you, Sue. Sue said gorgeous. And it is, I love it. I love it.
Thank you. As you zoom in, as it's so fascinating to see it in motion as you zoom in, and you can see the same pattern repeated and repeated and repeated. It's just amazing. Yeah.
And guess what? It keeps going. And this one's mathematical. So this one never stops. It's right now it's all there. So here's this big ball, and here's another, and here's another, and here's another, and it keeps going and going and going right in that one little place here. You've got so many orders of infinity, not orders, but examples. And there also are orders that never stop. We live in this infinite wonderland. And it can be so beautiful, but it can come from something so simple, doesn't that? I mean, that rings a bell for me, right? Come from something very simple. Thank you. I'm so glad you like that. Now we're going to go to the next one. I just wonder if anyone would like to guess, because these all look like trees, but they're not trees. It's like not everything looks like a tree, but guess what? The tree structure is within our bone marrow. Actually, it is within is everywhere. There are these family resemblances within the cosmos that are huge as a nebula or tiny as something microscopic. Or anyone want to guess what this is on the right?
River.
Yeah. And so I hate to make this like a one right answer, but in this case, it is a river, right?
With its tributaries.
And it's tributaries. And it's the River Nile. Outer space. And doesn't that look like a tree? I mean, parts of it. Okay. And on the left, that's you. That's me. This is a bunch of neurons from the brain. And our arteries and our veins look like that. And the trees, of course, look like that. There are all of these patterns in nature that are so amazing and that I think bring us together in yet another way. And I'm not sure that the fractal structure of our brain, which exists, may not have something to do in a lot of ways with some of the ways we can intuit and come up with new ideas. And of course, there are embedded infinities everywhere. Okay, so there's a question here, though. You think this is a picture of the Himalayas, the Himalayan mountains, or the Rocky Mountains?
I don't know.
Okay. And the answer here, this is, and I want to credit Gail Byock. The answer here is neither, because Gail saw this. She saw this pile of snow that a snow shovel had shoveled to the side of a parking lot in the CVS. And she was just learning about chaos theory. She said, my goodness, that looks like a mountain. And people said, oh, it's the Rockies because, or it's whatever because. And it's neither, because self-similar, these patterns are part of the patterns of life, or the patterns of existence. Life is, don't want to limit this to life. And so here is this snow shovel thing. And now here I'm crediting Tom Ukema for other ways to connect. So here we're going to look at a few ways that are a little different, but these are all part of our connections. And I'm sure many, many others we don't know about yet, and synchronicity for sure, but it's not in this list. So here we have mirror neurons. And mirror neurons allow us, that really were found in the early 90s in Italy, allow us to relate to each other. We are wired to relate to each other in very deep ways, deeper than mirror neurons, but anyway, it's a good start, right? And so here are people mirroring each other in an improv situation and learning to do that. Little babies, one baby cries in the nursery and they all start crying. And these are mirror neurons. We see someone, hopefully we have some empathy, and a brick falls on their foot and they go, ouch, and we go, ouch. And guess what? The same parts of our brain light up. So again, we're not saying the mind is all in the brain, but the brain is wired for this. All right. Okay, here is brainstorming. And what's going on when we're working with other people? And we are getting more when we feel there's a synergy there. I don't know if you've ever felt that. I did recently during some brainstorming. It was like, wow, we are all on the same page here, even though we're coming out with very different stuff. And it was people from different backgrounds. What's going on there? And we could do a thing, but now time is getting short, where we do some brainstorming. But if you want to come up with one use for a can that is not to hold soup, you may, and I'll come up with one here because a friend and I did it when we were in middle school, and we made a walkie-talkie, right?
Yeah, the old telephone.
Right, a telephone. And we were kind of stupid because we were putting this across high tension wires that were between her house and mine. But luckily we didn't have anything that was going to get inflamed. Anyway, in a brainstorming group, diversity helps, but just having the people helps. And it helps to build on each other and to be freewheeling and have fun, right? So So right here we have, this is exactly the point of not competing. And you've got to make sure a brainstorming group is working as a group. If they're competing with each other, it doesn't happen this way. And later we can start judging, which one do we want for a certain purpose? What are we going to put the soup in? But when we're just generating ideas, it's really about working with this group and just letting it happen. And we're in this more slow state that's more connected, or theory U, I think. Okay, moving along. Wu Chen did bamboo, and he was also a calligrapher and a spiritual being in China in the 14th century. And there are folios of his work that are called things like, because my grandmother had one. That's how I first heard of him. Not his work, but saw him at a museum. That portrait of the artist as bamboo. So he wasn't, there's some bamboo over there, I'm gonna have to do a picture of the bamboo. He became the bamboo in a way that was meaningful for him. And I think that's probably very meaningful for us. And I want to put it out there. in terms of what's meaningful for us, and even use a scientific example that's related, I believe. And this is Barbara McClintock, a geneticist who discovered jumping genes in corn that would help with a transposition with the new genetic generation and so on. But for a long time, there were a lot of people who did not understand what she was doing and thought this was weird, right? What was she doing? She was looking through her microscope. She was gathering data and all of that. They got that. But there was other stuff. And she said, the more I worked with them, the bigger and bigger they got. And when I was really working with them, I wasn't outside, I was down there. I was part of the system, and these were my friends. And that's a quote from her biographer. Did her work, look how she loved her work anyway. You can tell that beautiful picture on the right.
Mhm.
But yeah, but let's give her a Nobel Prize. Okay. Let's give her a MacArthur Award. Let's name a building after her. So this is not about finding the best, though. I want to say that very quickly. This is an example, though, about someone who was incredibly creative, who's not understood, and where it took a while for people to get it. And probably, I think, and her biographer thinks, she was using artistic, scientific ways of knowing, but definitely artistic too, if you've got to categorize it, that she had many ways of knowing. Okay, so here, so Gloria tells me a lot of people know all about entanglement. I don't know if you know all about entanglement. If you want to know all about entanglement, I got the book for you. And this is also, it's written by Louisa Gilder, and it's called The Age of Entanglement. And it also tells the stories of all these people, including John Bell, who came up with Bell's theorem and Bell's inequality and things that are very relevant. But this is the most fascinating book. But all I want to say is, let's pretend that these blue things are electrons, because I'm pretty sure electrons don't look like those blue things. But then again, they're so little that maybe they do. Right? That if you have two electrons, which have a negative charge, and they've come together at some point, they will always kind of be connected. That's the main point. All right. And so these electrons, let's say, have something called a spin, which they're not quite a ball, and it's not quite a spin like that, but this one's up and that one's down, and they're connected. And so this one gets turned down for some reason. There's a lot of experimental data now too. This is not some wild idea of the amazing Bell, but this one's down and this one's up, and now you flip them, and they both flip right away. In this case, the reason we have a lot of electrons in us, but there's so many things happening all at once, they cancel out. But you just take these ones. Okay, and how do they know? Is that because they have a yellow thing going between them? Not really, right? Unless they do, right? But there is something that is going between them. Now, let's say, and I want to, how do I have 5 more minutes here?
Yeah.
Okay.
We started late, so we can go a little bit over.
Oh, but we're only going to go 5 more minutes and we're almost done. This is the last example, but there's some important consequences here. So let's say they're 5 light years apart now, and that means it takes light 5 years to get from the left one to the right one. And we flip the one on the left so its spin goes the other way. And what you probably all know this already, because this group seems to be very wise, but the other one flips immediately. It's not waiting 5 years for light to come tell it what happened. It's happening immediately. And very clearly, something was already there. And if you want to read more, if you want to read the fun book, it's also a deep book, the book by Louisa Gilder. I mean, there are hidden variables, there are other kind of realms. It's not all, what we know about it so far, but Silicon Valley has made huge amounts of money on quantum computing, which looks nothing like the computers we're using now. And there is stuff here we don't begin to understand, but it is so powerful, and everything is connected instantaneously. So we are talking about a non-locality here. And this is not, some way out theory. It is happening.
And you said something that you said we have a lot of other things going on, so we can't really demonstrate it like ourselves. I'm paraphrasing. But it's about going to the, for lack of a better term, subtle realm where
I wouldn't be surprised, but I wouldn't necessarily limit what I said to that. I mean, I think there are hidden variables. Where are they hidden, right? There are other things happening. We know anyway there are other realms. Okay.
Yeah. Well,
it only makes sense that all of this would relate to the other realms. That's something that a lot of people don't hear.
Well, I mean, to give an example. When I first read about entanglement and the two particles, changing their spin simultaneously, what I realized was this was explaining. So sorry, it was explaining to me, or it was an example of what happens in distance healing, because in distance healing you go, the subtle energy, you're not sending it. You could be in opposite parts of the world and it is simultaneous. It is not affected by space or time, right? It's instant and it's not traveling the miles. It's just connecting and merging, kind of, or going to the place where we're already merged, where we're all one.
That is really, I love how you just put that. And I think we're going to mention David Bohm in a moment, the implicate order and the explicate order. So yes, space and time. Einstein came to see that time was relative, right? And many other things. But anyway, diversity. I mean, if you talk about what does it mean to have to live in a creative way and with a new normal, it means being in awe. It means accepting the mystery. It means seeing, in this case, something's already there and we don't begin to understand it. These may may very well be parts of it. But do you think we know all about it yet? I don't think so. And wormholes to other galaxies. I mean, we're still in the material realm there. There is so much that we still need to understand, and to not recognize our profound interdependence in the face of all this. So you would think there might be. So let me just finish up here. The new normal, though, if you want to read, say, economics or business, Jeremy Rifkin says the civilizations, we will have more and more empathy the more mature we get. So we will be more able to have empathy for everyone. Yeah, right? Okay. David Bohm, wholeness and the implicate order, and we're talking about the explicate order here, but there are other things going on, and that may be determining what we see that may not even be at all the basic thing. All right. And underneath this bar is Thich Nhat Hanh, right? What isn't this? Underneath this bar, and interbeing, which is really, we're still talking about the same thing here. And how much more will we understand in 20 years or 30 years? I hope a whole lot, because I believe there are solutions to many world problems here. I may have to go back to this one. Good Lord. Or this one. Let's see. And then, but I am going to show you the last slides here. So here we go. Okay, those are the last slides, but we can do a narrative for the new normal, and I'm going to not read it to you, but I'm going to say that we can live a life that is more in awe and fair. We feel more in wonder and belonging, and these red words are what we just discussed, in dynamic change and mystery, while seeing the uniqueness of each one of us. There are also many ways that we have a family resemblance, that we're together in this manifest world in these bodies. Okay, but we are not separate at all. And we are balancing in many ways to make our own creative contributions, which we do naturally and always. That's part of our job and part of our diversity and being alive. That's for us. Now let's look at the larger picture. Thomas Kuhn is the one who made up the paradigm shift term, and who did a lot of work on it, and who wrote this classic book that now is, from a while ago, 62. And we can remember things like the trial of Galileo. Why? Because he said Copernicus is right. The sun does not go around the earth. Well, okay, we know that. But what was the religious view at the time, the philosophical view, the historical view? That was not okay, and Galileo was on trial. Paradigm shift comes with difficulty if we're looking for a whole different way of living. It doesn't just happen. And as we know, political forces and other forces can hold it back. But as Kuhn says, that's Kuhn down there, that when the data gets overwhelming, it will happen. And with chaos and complexity, which we were just talking about a feel for here, but is a different way of looking at the world, evolving and changing and connected, and a whole heck of a lot we don't see, and mystery and awe and wonder and health in there, that this is something that some of the physical sciences said we saw a long time ago, and we've been doing chaos and complexity. But social science has done a lot less of that. Some have, but not as many. Is that time finally now? That's one reason that with my colleagues, we edited that chaos book, was to try to help do our part to help bring about that paradigm shift. Now, Stuart Kaufman, and this is the last slide here, but I think that his book, Humanity in a Creative Universe, which is Oxford 2016, and has a lot about quantum mechanics in there too, is a nice ending. If you remember that column A and column B, and column A was the reductive materialist column. He says at the intro to one chapter, I hope to convince you that reductive materialism, we can know it all, we build it all from little parts, okay. Materialism stops cold at the magnificent, the evolution of the biosphere, the most complex system we know of in the universe. At stake is our very view of reality. Also at stake is our freedom. Let me add there, free will, folks. We are living children of this nature, not above it, not to wrest our due from it, but to cherish it as one sense of the sacred. Thank you. I will stop share for a minute and so we can see everybody.
Anybody have a question or a comment?
I have a comment. I appreciate this audience and this group. And I hope that I didn't say anything that was sort of too obvious for you from where you come, but at the same time, when you want to make sure that people know
Yeah.
And a
no,
lot of people, they say, I never thought about creativity. I'm not creative. And we are
mhm.
all so, our
Yeah,
potential is powerful. And it's so important we develop the potential.
it occurred to me that a little story occurred to me about a child who was talking to an adult, and she was a small child, maybe 4 or 5 years old. And the adult said, the child said, "Let's sing," or something. And the adult said, I can't sing. I don't know how to sing. And the child said, "Did you forget?"
Yeah.
Because children are just naturally creative. It wouldn't occur to them that they can't sing.
What
Right?
what a great comment.
Yeah. Did
They-
you
they
forget?
make, I mean, it's wonderful how they make them up too. I mean, like we
Mhm.
have something that someone else wrote, but they just, well, I just wanted to say that last reference sounds so interesting to me. I'm gonna look that up, and that's my only hope in life. I mean, things seem so bleak, but that we are part of creation. We are part of the evolution. That we evolved the same way the other things did, and so there might be some hope in that that surely the same forces that keep other things in balance might help to balance us out. And just kind of one other thing that went through my mind. I heard this talk on Taoism, and I don't remember how this like related to Taoism, but the person gave the model of a pendulum swinging, and like the yin and the yang might be two different poles of the pendulum, and I don't know where this fits into Taoism, but he was saying like
That fits.
that when things get to extreme one way, then they have to go the other way. And so that's my other hope here, besides that we're part of evolution, is that like things have gotten so extreme. Surely it's time for them to go the other way now. So anyway,
So what
that
I like to think, what I think isn't a good word. Think is too conceptual and limited. What I like to contemplate is first of all, I believe that we are a very immature species,
Mhm.
and that we didn't come through all of this from the Big Bang, et cetera, and all these emergences to just for us to be it. We are not it. And I don't think AI is it either. Right? And actually, if you read this book, the last chapter is about three different, very different possibilities, but they all have to do with higher mind. Why would all this have happened except that we have the potential to evolve to a much higher consciousness? And I know that this is one of the premises of why you have your group and your project. So I'm very happy and honored to be here. And I believe that this gives us great hope that we ought to be working toward the paradigm shift, that it isn't always fast. But
what was that last
it
book that
happens.
you held up? The very last book that you held up, what was the name of that?
This is the one that won the Nautilus Award for Better Books for a Better World. And it was 2018, and it's in paperback now. It's called Everyday Creativity and the Healthy Mind. And it's written in a fairly accessible way, but has a lot of footnotes at the end.
Can you tell me, when was Stuart Kaufman's book written? Humanity and
2016, Humanity in a Creative Universe. And it is Oxford. I'll just double check that, but it's Oxford, same as ours. Oxford really likes this stuff. Our
you.
camps,
Yeah, and yeah, the only thing, one last thing that was running through my mind about this creative impulse is that sometimes we have a talent and we don't use it, and the repercussions of that, right? There's a quote by Goethe where he said, "The person born with a talent they are meant to use will find their greatest happiness in using it." And then Carl Jung said, what did he call it? I can't think of the term right now, but when somebody, let's say, is in a job that doesn't inspire them, that doesn't use their talent, right? When most of their energy is going towards things that don't utilize their creativity and their talent, that it can affect the immune system.
Oh, yeah.
He called it
Immune suppression?
no, it was something of type. I can't think of the first word. Falsification of type.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah,
And it has been substantiated since he said it by science, that it does play on our immune system when we're not using the skills that we have. So something to be said for that.
And I was mentioning some of the studies, and one reference there is Pennebaker, James Pennebaker, but that are the other end of that, is that being very creative, and particularly if we are dealing with some problems and looking at things we couldn't face before, but are finding new resilience and power, that really increases the power of our immune system and our T cells specifically. So none of this is our mind-body continuum. None of these parts are out there on their own. And it makes sense that people who, I'm sorry to say, but people who are really unhappy in their life, you say, why are people who are very lonely or dying younger and things? That there are ways that we're hopeful or we're not. And I think our creativity at best, and I want to show you one more book, and then I promise I will stop showing you books. But our creativity at best.
Well, that's what academics do. I know that stick.
Yeah, but this even has Taoism on the cover here. It has yin and yang for Edna.
Oh,
so it's really important to show Edna this book.
Okay.
Right.
The ethics of creativity.
Yes. That
I see Stuart Kaufman's name on there.
What are we?
Oh,
yes.
James Kaufman, different Kaufman.
But Shauna Moran is who put this book together, and she asked me to do a chapter among other people, and mine is called The Creative Alchemy. And it argues, but there are a lot of different views in here. But you don't usually find a book on ethics. It's like, what's the matter? We've got to, this is my AI problem. If we don't have ethics, how do we expect the AIs are going to have that, right? And so here we have the ethics of creativity. And my chapter is saying, if we can live in a way where we are more open and more non-defensive and more aware and more connected to each other and seeing what's going on in the world, not just in our, living room. So I'm just saying this book, and there's another one called The Dark Side of Creativity, but there are not enough books on the ethics of this. What are we being creative for? That is a big part of our chaos book too.
As long as the emphasis is on profit, the ethics will lag.
And so I'm tempted to show you another thing, but I don't know where it is. The Daedalus, the issue before last of Daedalus, which is a journal of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, is entirely devoted to a model of a different kind of culture. And whether you like that or not, it has more than one bottom line. Whether you like that model or not isn't the point. The point is that as a group of the status of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences is saying this isn't going to work. The way we're living is not going to work, and we've got to look at something else. And it's like, okay, so I was just at this conference and I made a point of referencing that and giving little impromptu speeches on AI and how we really need to look at what we're being creative for.
Yeah.
So even this book, it's like the chapter that's right after mine. It's like you would say, okay, so I've convinced them, and theory use in there too. This is all part of the more, ethical and good and collective and so on uses of our creativity. But right after it comes one called How Creative Identity Entitles Dishonesty. And it's about it, and it's about the pampering of these very special, eminent, creative people, because they're so special, and none of us are like that. And so,
like
of course,
Elon Musk, for example.
yes, of course, he can go by whatever Twitter, and he can park his car wherever he likes. No, that's not the point here. But where is the discussion? And it's probably here. But are we having enough of these discussions?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to say, that I believe that creativity is also a skillful means, taking a Buddhist path here, a skillful means to a higher way of living. It can be, all else being equal. It doesn't mean it has to be, but we can help it to be that, and we can help the process of finding our higher potential, both individually and together. And that's why I'm doing this. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you for a beautiful presentation and very thought-provoking. And I hope you'll come visit us again sometime.
Okay, maybe we can do the ethics of creativity with
Oh,
Shauna. Bye.
That would be
Bye.
great. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Gloria.